Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo bringing you another video talking about survivability in Star Trek Online. And in today's video I'm going to give one example of a science tank build. Now this one is not a fully finished one, this is very much leaning towards kind of like an off-tank science build. Simply because there's a lot of something that's not fully optimized in this thing, so it's much more of a couple seconds of being able to survive in tank. It's not really good enough fully for a completely head-on tank forever type of build. But as you see here, I'm using one of what I consider one of the better science tanks in the game, which is the Crossfields class Science Spearhead. The weird thing about this ship is that it basically has Science Dreadnought stats, but it has the turn rate very comparable to a lot of your normal science vessels. So it's kind of a blend between the two. And so in my science tank tier list, I actually have this under a science vessel category instead of science dreadnought, just because you still think about this guy more like a science vessel in terms of how you actually operate him. Just for my consistency, because I just like having 180-degree torpedoes. I have one in the front and in the back. But so yeah, I'll go ahead and go through my build that I have on him currently. Keep in mind that with the consoles that I have down here, technically the most optimal would be to have an EPG console with 4 Science Fleet consoles with Control X and EPG for the Science consoles from the fleet. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at this build. Now, for basically any science build, I can basically guarantee you that these two consoles here are going to be ones that you will have in every science exotic build. The first one is Gravimetric Photon Torpedo. This is super strong. This is from Voth Reputation. Yeah, or Dyson Reputation, sorry. Yeah, and you just need tier 2, and it's 500, 100, 100 Dyson marks plus 2 of the Dyson specific special things, along with some dilithium and energy credits, and you can get this thing. Another one that's and the special thing about this one, whenever you hit an enemy, you've got like a 20% chance or a 30% chance that you create a gravimetric rift, which you could almost think of as a basically super tiny gravity well. So super tiny gravity well that lasts a little bit less. However, whenever you use Torpedo Spread 3, it's basically guaranteed that several of these are going to pop up. So super nice. When you combine that with gravity well, I mean, it just creates an insane amount of damage. The other one that I like to use is Neutron Torpedo. I actually don't have the 2-piece on this ship. On my better science ship that I'll show in a few weeks, it will have the 2-piece with a Bioneural Gel Pack for the 2-piece radiation damage, which is very good. Basically, what this guy does is whenever he hits an enemy, he does a 3-kilometer, basically AOE energy damage cloud. Whatever, doesn't matter. So yeah, that's just something, and it's just helps to enhance your abilities even further. A third one that you'll see on a lot of them, not all, but on a lot of them, is the Particle Emission Plasmid Torpedo. This one is from R&D. If you get your R&D up to 15, you're able to able to craft this yourself. And so yeah, it's actually very nice. Basically, these two things combined are able to do a lot of AOE like radiation cloud stuff, and that's really nice. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this. Neutron Torpedo is from Delta Reputation. I believe also from Tier 2. Yeah, Tier 2 of Delta Reputation, 500 marks to the special ones, along with the lithium and energy credits to get that one. And for all of my science tanks, I like to have a 180-degree torpedo in the front and in the back for ships that have 4 weapons in the front and 3 in the back. And that's so that, because typically for your science ships, even if you are going in reverse for a little while and are getting the healing from maybe a particular trait called nonlinear progression, you're not always going to be able to turn fast enough to be able to always have the enemies in sight. And so having torpedoes to still constantly hit them, especially whenever you combine this with an explosive expert that adds a potential taunt whenever you're threatening. Having lots of torpedoes going out constantly to add additional taunts that don't rely upon your overall damage for threat is also fairly nice to have on your ship. The best one by far for the front is the Wide Arc Inhibiting Chronoton. That is from Gamma Reputation. I believe it's Tier 2. Maybe it's Tier 3. My bad. That one's actually in Tier 3 of Gamma Reputation. You have to get to Tier 3 to get this thing. The easiest way to farm that one is always just go to Swarm Advanced and just run that mission. Even without bonuses, you still get around about 100 marks per run, along with one of the special marks too, the whatever it's called for this reputation. Very, very strong. Very, very nice. Now, the one for your rear, there are a couple ones that you can use. If you're a Federation character, I recommend getting the wide-angle quantum torpedo launcher, which is from the Intel Assault Cruiser. This is a free cruiser that you can claim. It comes out, it seems like about once a year for Federation captains. And along with this ship is a wide-angle quantum torpedo launcher. So this is fairly nice. If you're a Klingon character, the one that I recommend, maybe I don't even have it. So I can't show you this on this one, but there is a Centauri missile that you're able to get from this mission called Mirrors and Spoke. It's a Centauri rapid fire missile launcher. It doesn't technically do as much damage. However, since you have more projectiles coming from there, you're basically able to be compensated through having one of these explosive experts that have these torpedoes, which mines and missiles count for torpedoes. By the way, for this guy here, all of your non-energy and non-exotic stuff will have a 10% chance to taunt the enemy whenever you're threatening, or placate whenever you don't have a threatening stance. Placate means that they basically can't attack you. So if you're a tank, you definitely want the taunt so that they're attacking you instead of your allies. Anyway, that's why I personally like to have a wide arc in front and back, so that I constantly have missiles going no matter what, and that. So this one you're probably not ever going to see for a normal science tank build, and that's because this is something that I think is pretty super cool, but most people completely overlook this thing. So this thing is the Advanced Diffusive Tetran Torpedo Launcher. When I eventually show my Tetran build that I recommend for the ultimate high end, I do include this guy as well as the console, because it does give a lot of Tetran damage. The reason actually why I use these two even though this one does give me some additional survivability, the biggest thing is actually the passive. The 2-piece set bonus gives me a 25% projectile damage, but more importantly, a 15% shield resistance. Okay, this is extremely rare to get in consoles and other things. It's this one. I think there's one other set bonus that also gives shield resistance, but you have to get like tier 3 or tier 4 to get it, and so it's not necessarily the easiest thing to get. Like this shield resistance by itself makes this console here worth it. By itself, like this second console down here is worth it for that shield resistance. And then there's just an extra torpedo in the back, so that's just nice too. For the third one here, because this is a science vessel, as you can see here, I have these science abilities. I have to have an energy weapon, otherwise I literally can't use these things. And so the one I chose to use was the one from Gamma Reputation, the Omnipolaron that you have to get tier 5 in order to get, so it is kind of pretty grindy to get. Whenever you combine this with this, I actually, and also considering everything, I'm actually able to have Deep Space Mine on this ship, because I have that one, plus I've got the 180 Torpedo, which is part of the set, and then I have Ordnance Accelerator. Ordnance Accelerator isn't really super valuable. On my other science build, I actually don't use this thing. I also don't use the 360 Omni weapon because it's actually not a true science vessel that I use on my Romulan Science character. But we'll get to that build in a couple of weeks. So the nice thing about Deep Space Mine anyway is that what you're able to do with it. Nice. I'm not sure why it's not even down here, but the nice thing about it is that like whenever you have like certain missions in which like enemies always seem to appear in a certain spot, like Swarm and a couple of other ones, you're able to like to launch off these things, and it's super nice. So, do I think this full 3-piece set is always worth it? No, it's definitely a lot more situational. But you know, I wanted to test it for fun, and so since this is my first science character that I was doing science tanking with, that I actually was seriously trying to go close to endgame with, I thought I might as well put it on the build too. For other important things, for my space set, I use the Lucari 4-piece set. Overall, in terms of the game, this is the best tanking set that works for a very aggressive playstyle. It definitely favors science. Like you've got scientific readiness. You've got a lot of additional passive stuff which really optimizes for science. Like you've got auxiliary to shield inside your warp core, and of course weapon to shield, because every ship has weapon to shield when you go to that high. Just the extra thing you get. The deflector is actually really nice. So most of your ones, like if they added a passive damage resistance already, you don't really care about it. This one adds radiation damage resistance, which is very strong, considering that most ships don't have radiation damage. Like you're typically a lot lower. Like even on this ship, radiation is still the lowest stat, and that's with something else passive being added here with radiation damage resistance. So you won't, like, this is very valuable. Do not overlook the fact that this has radiation damage resistance on it. It also has scientific readiness whenever you upgrade it high enough. I can't remember when you get scientific readiness, but you get an additional 50 scientific readiness, which is very powerful on science ships. For the impulse engines, the Lucari one, like if you're talking about 1-to-1, like obviously still the colony engines are still better than this. But these are still definitely up there in terms of like probably like the top 3 best engines in the game. Like whenever you get more 25% max hull within 5 seconds, you get additional flight speed, turn rate, and you get additional passive max hull regen for 6 seconds. Unfortunately, it's only once per minute thing, so you can only have this up at most 10% of the time. It's really though the warp core and then the shields as to why you would really want this thing, even on an engineering ship, and I'll explain why. So the Lucari Regenerative Shield, if you look at raw passive stuff, this doesn't look very high. Like typically you want at least 1100, like 1200 shield regen minimum, preferably a bit higher than that. However, you have less passive because you have this thing called Regenerative Shield Overflow, which will apply to you and your allies within 2.5 kilometers every 6 seconds, which every 6 seconds is a standard rate in which shields will do their normal regen. So it's basically like whenever your shields would normally do your regen anyway, you have this Regenerative Shield Overflow, which also gives your allies that shield regen per shield facing as well. When you have the 3-piece bonus, so when you have strike the shield emitters, that field goes from 2.5 kilometers to 5 kilometers. The special thing about 5 kilometers, especially if you use a science cruiser, is that 5 kilometers is the same radius as your command attract fire. So if your allies are really smart and you're using a science cruiser, or you're using a normal beam cruiser with the Lucari 4-piece set, when they're inside of your 5 kilometer radius, they're not only getting less threat generation, they're also getting additional shield regen to their ship. And by the way, there's this AoE stuff with the Lucari shields. This stacks with other Lucari shields as well. You could have several people with the Lucari Restoration Regenerative Shield Array, like all clumped together, and y'all can get a super ton amount of shield regeneration. Especially if you're going to run a PvE queue with more than one tank, or like a tank and an off tank, it's highly suggested for at least one of you to have the Lucari shield. Like if one of you is going to be a tank, one's going to be the off tank should take the Lucari shield for sure. And also, what makes this the super aggressive and nice one is the warp core. So you have an ability called Point Jump. So you talk about 4 kilometers in front of you, which is pretty similar to actually the mycelium network thing that this thing has, which I'm not using on this ship right now. Now technically you get some stealth, but if you're doing threat generation, you'll break through the stealth anyway. When you have the 4-piece bonus, you get a couple of extra fun stuff. You get a bunch of temporary hit points, and to enemies within 5 kilometers, they have about 25% less shield resistance for 10 seconds, which is super significant. Okay. Of course, it also goes out to 2 minute recharge instead of 4 minute whenever you have the 4-piece too. So basically, instead of just doing a normal point jump to get closer to an enemy, this thing also makes the enemies easier to kill too. And then, like most debuffs in the game, just lower the whole resistance. There are a couple ones that like drain shields, whatever, but this one will make their shields significantly weaker. So like, even if you're doing less damage, hey, guess what? Now my weapons are like 25% more effective against this ship now for the next 10 seconds. That is super nice. Now, as for a science ship, this really only affects more of the kinetic damage from your torpedoes, since a lot of radiation damage passes straight through shields. And so this will mainly affect your allies being able to take down enemies a lot faster, but this still affects you for your DPS numbers as well. So yeah, in terms of like 4-piece sets in the game, do not underestimate the Lucari 4-piece set. Now, the Lucari stuff is a pain to get, simply because the Lucari missions are a lot different from most other missions in that the Lucari missions are based primarily around having tanks on your team. So you have the front, it's super hard to take out the bases if the ship going towards the bases is not a tank. Gravity kills. If you don't have a tank to like distract the big boss at the end, it takes a super long time to beat that one. Junior Gauntlet. Good luck keeping the things up if your team doesn't have a tank, because as whenever you destroy a attack group, then the next one is kind of swarming in. So good luck doing that one without a tank and actually trying to have all three of your generators survive. I love it's based around tanking, and since most people in the game focus on DPS, they are fairly hard queues to do. However, at the moment right now, if you do Crystalline Cataclysm, you're able to get 75 marks for every single time that you run this mission. If you're wanting to get this set, now is the time to get it. Or whenever like the next event runs or something. A lot of your event stuff you'll be able to basically get any mark that's available at the moment in the game, and it allows you to farm a lot of marks that are really hard. Competitive is pretty popular for a lot of people. As I'm a tank player, the Lucari stuff is super strong. The Lucari 4-piece in space, as well as the armor and weapon on ground, the 2-piece for science captains, is especially strong too. So, just that to think about. For secondary deflector, deteriorating secondary deflector is kind of the best one, really overall. There are other ones you could consider, especially on a science tank, but that's just that. For engineering consoles, I have the DPRM console, which, since this is Gemdar Captain, I had to buy the ship, because Gemdar Captains, the way that the game treats Gemdar Captains for your factions is that no other faction that you ally with, they're literally just that faction, so the game treats this character as just a regular Federation captain. A little unfortunate, but yeah. As I mentioned in past videos, the shared process integration is basically a slightly nerfed version of the Protomatter console from the Lucari ship. Since this is my second account, I don't have access to that ship, and so I don't have access to that console. So this is the next best one in the game by far. For your science consoles, you'll want the EPG or Exotic Particle Exciter. You either want EPG as your stat or Control X. If you're going for a super aggressive DPS one, EPG is the one to go for. If you want to be a true tank, Control X is definitely the way to go. Just saying. This one's actually not as optimal anymore. I tested this with other stuff. Other things are better. I just don't have access to them on this character at the moment. So this is still a placeholder here. Still gives great shield capacity, great crit chance to crit severity, but there's also a trait which gives you a lot of that too. As well as some passive shield resistance, which whenever you don't have a lot of set bonuses, that's normally pretty valuable. These two ones are off of the exchange. A lot of your DPS guys will have these, but not in the science console slots. As science tanks, you're very limited on your slots, because you really should have these 4 slots here being something from the fleet. Fleet research, I think. Trying to remember if it's this one or not. It's MC. I'm having trouble remember where this thing is. Sorry guys, it's been a... Okay, here we are, sorry. So, most of your science guys will go for exotic particle focusers. In my experience, actually, the restorative particle focusers are much better for your science tanks and science off tanks. So, even just a tier 1 version of like development laboratories, which over here on Dominion, still a super young fleet, but we're actually pretty close to that. So even on Dominion characters, you'll be able to get this really soon. As obviously doesn't have access to that yet, I don't have that here. So I just have to sell Deflector Generator and Construction Anchor. These are both very good damage places because this gives bonus exotic damage. There's several categories of damage throughout the game. There's your normal damage, your bonus exotic, bonus damage. I think there's a third one too, but I haven't looked fully into that to see like how that fully works inside calculations. But they give bonus exotic damage, and their activatables also give a lot of damage in threat generation too. For this character, I have this just to have basically additional hull and control, which especially for a science ship because you're going to have low hull anyway. Adding some additional stuff to give you more hull capacity is fairly critical. Whether it's here, whether it's traits, whatever, having additional hull capacity is very critical just because your science ships are going to be very low hull typically on by themselves, and so that's very important to have. I've already mentioned this console. It's from Gamma Reputation as well. Again, this one plus this one, very strong two-piece. This is lobby Crystal Consortium stuff, so not all of you will be able to afford to get this, but this is a very, very strong two-piece, especially if you're doing a Tetran build or a Tetran Science Tank too. Yeah, like for this one, you could very easily put a Tetran Omni here instead of this one, and it would do a lot of amplification just like the chronometric capacitor. Most of your science guys in the game are going to want this guy just because it gives an additional EPG, which there's very few stuff in the game that gives EPG outside of science. This is one of them. Also, what's the one in R&D? The Conductive Rcs Accelerator, if you get the right proc on it, or the right thing on it, EPG is one of the potentials for the Conductive Rcs Accelerator for the engineering consoles. I obviously, because I'm a tank, I prefer Control X to EPG, but they both work. And last one here is Assimilate Module. It gives a lot of control expertise as well as some additional passive hull regeneration, which is fairly nice. So this is my skill tree for this one. My Romulan Science guy is a little bit different this one in terms of its overall placement for the stats. This is just my first real one that felt good, but this isn't the super most optimal way. But I'll go ahead and go through this. I still have the 2 points in hull and shield capacity. However, a lot of times in fights, because science has a lot less hull to begin with, it can get bursted down if you don't time your abilities, time like your subnucleonic beam and your co-opt energy weapons properly. This is the most critical thing to survive burst damage. Because, like for instance, if you have a 1,000,000 damage ability coming at you, and you pop this, okay, that 1,000,000 damage thing now only has 250,000 damage. But oh, your ship has 50% resistances. It's now down to 125,000 damage. And so with 100,000 hull plus additional hit points, which can stack to 10 times, you can actually have 150,000 hull, which can survive a 125,000 damage hit. Which, yeah, if you're an engineering captain, it's very, very, very hard. I'm just going to put it that way. For scientists, it's much, much simpler to survive it than for anyone else inside the game. But, yeah, for skills, again, that's why you want to hold this, because you'll be able to survive burst damage. They'll just kill everyone else, but you still need to get your hull back, which is your biggest weakness because you don't have a lot of your passive stuff to begin with that most cruisers that engineers use will be able to have. In terms of damage stuff here, you're not going to be focused on energy because in terms of your power levels, in order to be a true science tank, you have to have exotic or auxiliary powers as your primary and shields as your secondary. So weapons and engines is going to be very, very, very low. A lot of your high-end like science, like DPS guys are going to have aux primary and weapons secondary, but you can't afford to have weapons super high because you need shields as your secondary to be very high. So projectiles is definitely a good way to go. That's why basically everything in here is projectiles besides one. And my ships that don't need the energy weapon are all projectile. So that projectile is maxed out. I have 2 EPS flow. This is still very valuable for a little bit of regenerative power levels, and also for like whenever you do full impulse and then you're going from full impulse to going in reverse. This helps be able to do that faster, so that your trade can go into effect even faster. And I'll get to that in a bit. I have all 3 points in control, simply because exotic damage is what you're doing. This right here is able to amplify your exotic damage. 2 points in Drain-X, just for the resistances in Drain-X, as well as it amplifies this guy a little bit more. All in accuracy and defense, because why not? All 3 points in hull plating, because you still need that very strongly. You need a point in damage control and shield regeneration. Very, very, very valuable to have. 2 points in shield hardness still, because that's still, even with your extra stuff you're getting with science, you still want this. And then all points in weapon crit chance and crit severity. And for these ones here, got a point in defensive substitution, because shields and auxiliary is the 2 things that you want, so that's extremely efficient. All points in EPG, because you need that. I don't have anything in long-range targeting sensors. So the maximum distance penalty inside the game for your weapons only applies to energy weapons. So your torpedo weapons and your exotic damage is not affected by the long distance range penalty. So as a science tank, you don't need to invest in this at all. It's not going to hurt your damage at all if you don't have any points in this. So just keep that in mind. Also, because most of your stuff is exotic damage, which bypasses shields anyway, you don't really need this stuff here. You could do hull penetration to bypass the armor, but you definitely wouldn't need the shields. Then last things here, I have all points in the shield mastery stuff here. I only have 2 points here just because now I used to have all 3, but after I realized that the deflector here gives additional scientific readiness, I just wasn't getting any additional benefit from the 3rd point in scientific readiness here. So that's why that point went to defensive system tuning, because that just helps everything else more too. Specializations. This guy uses Miracle Worker Command. However, Temporal Operative is still very strong too. So I would say Miracle Worker Temporal Operative or Miracle Worker Command is the way that you should be going as a science tank. You can easily make the argument either way. It's really just up to you as to what you want. Okay, so for space traits, Particle Manipulator is extremely nice. You get this from R&D 15, which your Gemini guys automatically have, along with projectiles and shields that are 15 for those traits. I use Concentration of Energy, which science captains inherently have. So the core to science tanking right now is a trait called Enlightened, which is very cheap on the exchange. Gives you more exotic damage and hull regeneration, both of which you benefit from significantly as a science tank, and actually even as a regular tank, a regular cruiser tank. This is a great trait too. And this one combined with Positive Feedback Loop, extremely nice. That basically all of your hull and shield heals give an additional 10% exotic damage, and then when after you use exotic damage, you can use you can use a hull and shield heal, and that's 10% more effective. Extremely valuable. I can't emphasize how valuable this is in a science tank. I also have Psychological Warfare. Just gives an additional controllability effectiveness, so that even though I don't have as much EPG, like Gravity Well is still going to be fairly strong in terms of its pull. Other traits that I have is Biotech Patch, Bulkhead Technician, Ablative Shell, and Shield Technician. Just because this character does have a lot of great traits. Shield Technician would actually be replaced with something else for sure. In fact, on my science tank for my Romulan captain, which is my real main captain, that's my main character in the BSC fleet. You won't see that one in the build. You'll see some other unique space traits as well. For my starship traits, the only two that I feel are actually good on this character is Honor Dead, because it's stacking damage resistance, and mainly it's the hull regeneration, which is very valuable, combined with non-linear progression. When you're in reverse, after 5 seconds, you get additional hit points and shield regen per facing each second. I need to emphasize, this is an each second thing. Okay? Very, very, very strong. Most of your shield regen stuff is per 6 seconds. So the fact that there's a trait which is giving you, first of all, it's giving you shield regen per second, not per 6 seconds, but per second. So you actually would multiply this by 6. So if you want to put this in perspective, even one that's not super strong, this one's already giving me an extra 2,000 regen per second. Which when you combine that with this here, it's basically doubling my shield regen when I'm going in reverse. That's what this trait's basically doing whenever you math it out. It's not necessarily doubling my whole regen, but that's still nice too. This is why for this ship, well, for basically any science tank, you'll want non-linear progression, and literally like the playstyle that you would do is, you would have your torpedo spread, you zoom in, and you immediately fire torpedo spread and this, and then immediately go into reverse. And then you're keeping everything in the 135-degree arc of that, hopefully as well as your 90-degree arcs for your torpedoes. And then you're continually blasting the enemy and just doing lots and lots and lots of damage. And then all those AoE stuff are stacking with lots of your enemies together. That's basically the playstyle of how your science tanks would really work. Keep in mind, non-linear progression, you're able to get at 15 points invested in temporal operative, which is something that for the majority of you that are science characters are going to be investing in anyway. So it's something that if you're a science character, you are going to have this trait anyway. I'm sure almost none of you are actually using this trait, but if you want to be a little bit tankier, this one's extremely valuable for science survivability. It's also good for a very specific ship in the game. If you're going to be a beam tank, super strong on this ship, by the way. But anyway, there is that. Other starship traits, they're really just filler. I don't have any good ones on this character besides those two. So I've the next best two that I've got access to, which kind of frequency, just so I can spam this more alongside Science Fleet, and then predictive algorithms, just because whatever. Those ones aren't really worthwhile. These two are really the strong ones. So for space reputation, this is a more damage type build. So I have offense and defense, combined with particle amplification, which gives me bonus exotic damage, and then my survival is active hull hardening. This one's also extremely valuable too. I definitely value this one more, just because I already have non-linear progression. This one isn't quite as important to have. It's still definitely very nice to have. It's just less important to have. Denver Space reputation. Funny enough, science tanks don't actually get super close to the enemy, and so the Tetran Cascade isn't as bad to have on a science tank than for other tanks. Such because force challenge isn't really valuable to you because you aren't going to be close to the enemy. So for a science tank, I hate that I'm saying this, but if you're a science tank, don't use force challenge. Use your fracking Tetran Cascade instead. If you're going to do like that in space as well. And I'm telling you what's super nice to have. I actually just recently got this on this character, that's why it's not being used, but it should be being used. But it's not slotted there right now. It really should. That's better. All right. I believe that's everything. Sorry that this video took so long. It's first I'm talking about science thinking for builds, and so I'm sorry that it took super long to get through all this, but I wanted to like give some credit where credit was due in terms of like different things and as to why I was particularly using them on this ship. Also, I don't have Gamma. I don't have the Delta Recruit stuff fully finished for my second account, which is why certain devices, I haven't played a lot of certain missions with this character, so there's certain devices that would be here that I don't have there yet. Alright, that's enough for this video. Sorry about the ranting, but thank you all for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.